All right, everyone, welcome back to Schmattz Outdoors. We're going to go over a little bit. I've had a bunch of people asking me how I did on my mule deer hunting trip. I was successful. We'll kind of go over a little bit of how the trip went, kind of that type of deal. We'll show you guys some pictures and a little short video clip, but it was tough hunting, honestly. Different than what I expected. That's kind of to say, that kind of wraps everything all up. Common courtesy just did not have a place on this trip, I guess. Between hunters, you know, if I'm going into hunt an area and I seen somebody else, you know, somebody wearing blaze orange setting someplace, I'm gonna, you know, avoid them. I'm gonna go somewhere else, you know, pick a different spot. There's lots of public land, you know, out in the area that I was hunting. I'm not going to go into the exact area I was hunting, anything like that, just for respect for myself. You know, maybe someday I'll draw the stake again, go back out there, but there are other people that are trying to hunt these areas, so I'm not going to say exactly where I went, but yeah, so anyway, if I go walk into some place and I'm hunting, you know, duck hunting, any kind of hunting, duck hunting, doing anything, pheasant hunting, if there's other people there, I move on to the next spot. That did not seem to be the case out there, which surprised me, honestly. Kind of the North Dakota nice kind of thing just didn't really come into play, I guess. So I'm not going to go into every instance, but several times, you know, I went into the trip with the idea that I was going to end up hiking, you know, a ways from the road, trying to get away from people. That was kind of my whole thinking before I went. Little did I know that I was not planning on hiking far enough. So just for example, the second morning, so I had a North Dakota mule deer take. Let's start with that. The season starts at noon Central Time, so where I was hunting was in Mountain Time Zone, so it started at 11 a.m. on Friday. So that morning I was at my stand location. I got there about 7 o'clock. Legal shooting time would have normally been like 6:15, but again, first day of the season doesn't open till 11. I got there about 7 o'clock. I hiked like 1.25 miles off of a road. Was sitting there, I watching a pretty good sized draw system. Thought, well, if I can hopefully see some animals moving around, you know, I could kind of just set up on them, be ready for the start of the season, and, you know, move around as needed, you know, follow them if I needed to, if I had found a good buck to hunt. And yeah, I was sitting there by 9:30, 10 o'clock. Here a pickup drove in, I don't know, less than 100 yards from where I was setting. I actually stopped them because I had planned on starting where I was setting, and I was going to work away from the road through this whole kind of basically the finger draws that are coming off of one bigger draw. I was just going to kind of work my way using the wind to my advantage to stay downwind of these draws and kind of walk and look into each draw as I went by, you know, or even set up and glass, you know, what I could glass, you know, and move around kind of slowly through the rest of the day and hunt until dark that way, or get closer to dark, then find a spot and set down someplace, you know, and watch, you know, for the evening, you know, when the deer are hopefully going to get up and move. So these guys come driving in behind me. I stopped them. Well, here come to find out they were going to drive several miles out past me, basically driving right through the whole draw system that I planned on hunting. And I told them that I had planned on going that way. Didn't even care. Like, he's like, well, we got the tags. We already have our spot picked out where we want to hunt. I'm like, well, you're going to drive right through everything I want to hunt. Didn't even really care. So that was kind of my first sign. It was like, okay, that's a bummer, whatever. So they drive on. I decided to move 3/4 mile away from where I was setting, sideways kind of to the direction. Instead of walking, I was headed west. Instead of going further west, I turned and I went south and walked 3/4 mile out until I run into a big draw system. I think I could have got down and through it and up on the other side. But honestly, I found basically by a happenstance, found a really nice spot to set on a hillside, and I could see like probably a mile one direction down this draw, and I could see probably 3/4 mile the other way, and then up some of the fingers on the opposite side. And the wind was in my face, so thought good spot. I sat there basically from legal shooting time, so 11 a.m. until probably 15 minutes before the end of shooting time, and I did not see a single deer. And I seen 6 other hunters while I was sitting there. So when it was starting to get dark, I was, a 1.5 miles or more from my truck. I decided with 15 minutes left of legal light, I'm going to get up and I'm going to head to the truck so I can hopefully get out of, I had to walk through some rougher country to get back to kind of some flat land, and then I could get back to my truck. So I didn't want to walk through there in the dark if I didn't have to. I hadn't seen deer. I had a guy walk up right behind me, maybe a half an hour right before that. I was just kind of done, honestly. So I went back to the truck like 50 minutes before shooting time. Second morning I got up. I had picked a brand new spot with the wind direction being basically the same as it was the first day. Walked in most of 1.75 miles off of the road. I got there half an hour before legal light. Walked out, got basically set up right at legal shooting light, which was about 6:15 a.m. or thereabouts. Got set up, watching again a pretty good sized draw system. I could see again 1 mile one way, maybe a half a mile the other way. Looked very promising. I was, figured there'd be a deer popping out at any moment. Well, I kind of know why now, maybe why that wasn't the case, but hour or so after shooting time, so like 1.5 hours I had been sitting there, here a pickup comes from the opposite side. They stopped maybe a half a mile from me up on the hillside on the other side. I don't think they could maybe even see into the draw system yet, or not much if they could. I was watching them with my binoculars. I had my binoculars on a tripod. I could see both guys in the pickup looking at me with binoculars. It's pretty easy to tell which way they're looking, and they were both looking right at me. And I thought, okay, they're going to turn around and go back the way they came. No, they did not. They literally drove across the hill, down into the bottom, down the bottom of the draw right towards me for a ways, and then up one of the hillsides to get up on my side of the draw. They were gone maybe a minute or so, and next thing you know, here they come. They drove within 100 yards of me, drove right behind me. I stood up and kind of held my arms up like, hey. They both staring straight forward, never even looked at me, and just drove right on by me. But they drove right down through the draw system. Didn't bump any deer out that I seen, which means, I was sitting there for nothing anyway. But had there been deer there, they would have chased every deer out of that whole draw system, or they did. So yeah, I ended up walking out of there, got my truck. So you can drive on trails out there. I don't really know exactly what they consider a trail. I even talked to a DNR officer from out there. He didn't even really give me a very good definition of what a trail is either. So I drove on a trail out past where I was setting so I could get farther out into this public hunting piece until basically the trail stopped, dead-ended. Then I got out and I started hiking around in the middle of the day. And I ended up hiking, over 1 mile, I would say, from where my truck was parked. And sure enough, here a pickup come across some private land. He was most of 1 mile from me when I first seen him. And I was like, well, they're coming right at me, gonna drive right into here. So I actually walked down through this draw system and up on the hillside, and there's basically like 3 different draw systems kind of made a fan from where I started walking. So they were coming up on the one farthest to the north. So I'm like, oh, all right, I'll just leave that draw system alone. And I popped up over and I threw the draw and up on the hillside on the other side. Got into the next little draw system. There wasn't much cover in there. Sat there like half an hour and ate lunch. And then decided that, that wasn't a very good spot to be for the evening sit even, and I still had plenty of time. So I walked around and I walked most of another mile to the next big draw system and found me a good spot to set. And then there was tons of brush on the hillside on the opposite side of the draw from me. So I basically okay, I'm going to set right here. Spent the rest of the afternoon glassing. I finally seen down the draw right on the edge of the private public line. They were on private. There was 2 does popped out. and come out of the bottom of the main draw that I was sitting next to, and then kind of walked up on the hillside and the other side, and they were in and out of the brush on the other side, but they were like a half mile or a little more from me. The first one come, he come one at a time. They come, I darn near moved. Second doe come, and I could definitely see it was does, you know, using 15 power binoculars. I could see they were does, no horns. I sat there contemplating. I'm like, gosh, should I move down closer to them, you know, in case they would get onto private and in case there was more deer. Sure enough, here popped out a little fork buck. Again, still on the private land, and the does were mingling around, and I don't know, right at the end, they may have finally crossed the fence. There actually was a fence on the private public line there, because that's not always the case out there. But I think at the end, they may have ended up on the public, but little fork buck come and they were milling around. So I'm watching them for most of a half an hour looking to the east from where I was setting. I'll drop a picture in here, the draw system I was watching. And then the next picture here, where right above my finger is where those 3 deer are at. And I took that just moments before I ended up seeing this deer. So you can't see them in the picture. I understand that. They're more than a half mile away, and I'm using my phone. I did not film at all. The GoPro just is not good for filming in that kind of country. You know, if I'm filming me, you film pretty good. You could see the woods, but you get 100 yards out, you can't pick out a deer standing there. You know, like a whitetail, if there was a whitetail behind me. So, I mean, in that country a half mile away, I mean, you would never see anything. So I was filming with my phone, or took a picture with my phone. So I'm watching them deer, contemplating, like that little fork buck come. I wasn't going to shoot him. I mean, he was way smaller than I was after. So I'm like, God, I should move down there in case more deer keep filtering off of that, out of the bottom of this draw, the part of it that I couldn't see, and coming out, you know, I could have got right on the edge of that private public line. And if a bigger buck would have come, hopefully you would have got onto the public before, you know, nightfall. Just happened to glance. So I was looking towards my left, down this draw towards the east. Just happened to peek over my shoulder, and here come a buck, a decent buck come. When I first seen him, he was like 150 yards away. I'll pop a little picture in here of what I was looking at. And then I'll pop a picture in here of where I first seen him. He's about 150 yards from me, walking right down the bottom of that draw. And I've been watching that way, and I'd been watching across the draw from me, glassing the hillside, you know, for a couple hours at that point. I seen the buck coming. I got my glasses and binoculars on him. I didn't see no back forks on him, but I'm like, oh, that's a nice looking buck. He looks pretty good size, like body wise, he looks big, you know. So I'm like, okay. Got down, I was setting kind of up on a rock elevated above where my gun was setting. There was just nowhere to set my bipods on, so I had them right kind of in front of me. So if I'm setting on a rock, my gun would have been setting like on that ground. And my gun's only got bipods this high, so I had to get down here to see through my scope. So I got down, got behind my gun, looked at him like, God, I'm going to shoot that buck if he gives me a chance. So sure enough, here he comes. He got behind, there's a little knoll kind of coming, and I'll point that out here. And then he kind of went behind that little knoll. I'm like, okay, he should be coming. I'm like, he was walking pretty much at a pretty consistent pace. He did stop a couple times and look around a little bit, but otherwise he pretty much was, you know, a nice, comfortable walking pace coming right at me. So I'm like, oh, he should be popping out behind that knoll anytime. So I have a little video here, and I'm waiting and waiting and waiting. It's called phone scope. So it mounts your phone on top of your scope, and then you look through your scope normal, but it looks down and then out your scope. And I'll put the little clip in here in a second. So I'm waiting and waiting and waiting to turn the video on. I should have turned it on as soon as I kind of decided I was going to shoot him, and I could have taken some more footage of him. And I apologize a little for that, but in the heat of the moment, I'm not thinking about that. I'm thinking like, okay, we got to get down, get ready, get prepared, you know, in case this buck gives us a shot. So sure enough, here he steps out, kind of settle my crosshairs. In this little video I'm going to pop in here, you can see that it didn't really settle him. I didn't take much time settled, but even when I've taken video of myself coyote hunting, I do basically the same thing. It's like I hardly get settled on the animal and then shoot. Okay, so I'm going to drop the little clip in here, and then I'll explain kind of what's going on there. All right, so you could see deer steps out. I just barely got my camera turned on in time. I happened to see his antlers coming behind the knoll, and I'm like, oh, he's right there. Turned my camera on, or my phone, started it recording, got on the deer, made a good shot. I felt like a good shot on him. He takes off running. So right away in that video, you kind of lose the deer. That's me running the bolt action on my rifle. It picks him up for a little short period of time. And what ended up happening is I had my gun, I actually shot him like facing this way. He started running around, so I actually had to pick my gun up and move it. So that's kind of why you lose him for a stretch in there. And then when I pick him back up, he's kind of stumbling. Well, what he ended up doing in the meantime, when he was running and I was moving my gun, he run into a tree, like head first banged into this tree. And I'll pop a couple pictures in here. And while the pictures are showing, you could see all the bark that he took off of that tree and actually gouged the tree with his horn, where he literally like head first banged into that tree. And that's roughly 30 yards from where I shot him. And then he basically, the video picks up and he basically kind of see him stumbling. That was right after he hit the tree, and he basically stumbles over and tips over, and he was done. So all that literally happened from the time I seen him to the time he was done was maybe a minute and a half tops. Like, I mean, and he closed, I ended up shooting him at about 85 yards. I'm shooting a 6.5 Creedmoor. Deer never even knew I was there until I shot. It ended up hitting it. It went through, it come out, hit him right in the shoulder on my side, and it come out mid-body on the other side. He was quartering to me a little bit more, and even in the video, it still to me don't look like he's quartering that hard. But the bullet comes out about mid-body on the opposite side. Did tons of damage inside of him. Deer went down quick. Like I said, he was dead within 30 seconds of me shooting. So yeah, like I said, we'll show you a little bit here. I don't know how well this camera is going to pick him up, so I just got the skull plate of him here. So he's just a 3x3. The back tines, I haven't really measured nothing on there. I'm just giving you rough estimates. He's about 18 inches inside. His back, his G2s are about 9 inches. His fronts are about 5. I don't know how long the beams are. I'm guessing they're 20 inches maybe. They might not be quite that long. 17, 18 inches I bet the beams are. So yeah, not the hugest deer in the world. But again, he does have one little eye guard on that side, but it's only 3/4 of an inch long. So just a true 3x3. So I ended up shooting him on the evening of the second night. I went out a couple days ahead of time. I did some scouting ahead of time. I did find one nicer buck that had basically the same size but had forks in the back. I'll drop a picture in here. He had a little fork horn with him. I should have had an archery tag because I was 35 yards from that deer, this deer I'm showing. I was 35 yards from him when I took that picture with my phone. And the sun just happened to be glaring. I just couldn't get a good view of him, of those antlers. I'll try to zoom in on the picture a little bit and so you guys can see. But he had forks on the back and forks out the front. He would have been body-wise same size as the one I shot. And other than not having, mine don't have the forks, his had like 3-inch forks on the back. That was Wednesday night when I got out there. I did some scouting and I walked into him in the evening and that little fork buck, and I found 4 more does that night. The next morning I walked into a completely different spot and I found a big 3x4. I figured had like 16-inch G2s, and the one that he didn't have a fork on the back on the one side. He was just a G2 with no G3. It was flat, so if he was looking at me, I couldn't even hardly see it against the hillside. But when he turned, it looked like 1.5 inches wide all the way to the tip. And then he had like maybe a 6-inch fork on the other side. And then he really splayed out. Like this one curls around like this, curls. That one kind of splayed out. So his G2 and then his G4 and then the main beam was out beyond that. He was, like I said, 16-inch backs. He probably had 8-inch fronts the way it looked. And I'm guessing he was in the mid-20s in width. Big guy. He had 5 does with him and a little fork buck with him. The wind was blowing super strong out of the northwest the 2 days I scouted. the first day of hunting season, it had switched to south, so that's why I didn't go in after that big guy, because you would have blown that whole system out, because the wind would have been blowing the wrong way. So I purposely didn't go there, thinking, well, I'll wait till the wind's right and then I'll go in there after him. Well, it turns out I ended up harvesting a deer. So I seen 4 deer in 2 days of hunting out there, all within that same about half an hour time period. So when I seen this guy coming, like, I was wondering if I was even gonna see deer. As many people that were hunting out there and driving through everything, I just kind of is like, I'm kind of done dealing with the people, and I'm gonna take the nice, that's a nice buck. If he'd have been at 300 yards, I may not have shot at him. Let's put it that way. I shot him at 85 yards. He was right there. I knew I could make a nice clean kill on him, and I'm happy to have him. So I have a nice freezer full of mule deer meat. You guys can say one way or the other, what do you think is a nice buck or not? I'm happy with him, and to me, that's all that counts. I'm actually ecstatic about him. First time ever mule deer hunting, first mule deer I've ever taken. After the fact, when I was taking care of this deer, it took me 3 hours from the time I shot him to the time I got my truck back to the gravel road. It was well past dark by the time I got back to the gravel road. So at that moment, if you'd have asked me if I was ever going to apply for that tag again, I told you no. Now, with a little bit of time, it's been several weeks now since I've been back, I'm going to apply again, but I'm definitely going to go into it with a whole different mindset of, one, how to get away from people, kind of use the other people's strategy to my advantage instead of them ruining my hunt. I think maybe trapping before I went might have been a little bit of a mistake, because I was pretty beat down already by the time I pulled my line. And then to drive 6 hours out there, I put on 8.5 miles the day I shot that deer. So I was a little bit beat up before I went. If I'd have had to hunt 16.5 days, or would have hunted the entire season, which is 16.5 days, I don't know if my body would have held up to that. I'm guessing I'd have had to probably even take a full day off in the middle there sometime, but, or even do just pre-road hunting like everybody else is. So, never even get out of the truck. Just, I'm in pretty good shape. The walking didn't bother me, and to be honest, it was just kind of the setting on the rocky hillsides. It's not like walking across your flat yard here. I live in flat country here in Minnesota and eastern North Dakota. It's flatland. It's nothing like that out there. So yeah, overall, kind of a stressful trip because I wasn't finding deer and the other people ruining my trip. A successful trip, happy to have a deer. I think that's about all I got for you guys. So just kind of an update. I did get a deer. I was successful. I'm honestly, I'm super happy I got one. I had put a lot of pressure on myself to harvest a deer out there, and I think that part of the reason why I ended up taking a deer so early in the trip. I think if I had hunted, longer, another week, could I have found a 4x4, which is kind of was my sort of minimum going out there. I was hoping for just a decent representation of a mule deer. I feel like I got that, honestly, but something with forks on the back, like a 4x4 with or without eye guards, if you know anything about mule deer. That was kind of my goal going into it. Once I kind of got out there and assessed the situation, my goals changed a little bit, and like I said, I'm ecstatic to have this nice 3x3. I don't know if I'll put him on a board or anything and hang him in my house. I'll leave him hang all winter here in my garage, let the bugs eat any of the goo out of him, so it doesn't stink inside your house. And then I'll decide like in the spring if I want to put him on a board or not. But yeah, so there kind of is a little short story. If you guys got questions about the trip or anything, you put it down below. Again, 6.5 Creedmoor. I'm shooting 143 grain EDLXs. I was prepared to shoot out to like 300 yards with that with 6.5 Creedmoor. Zeroed at 200. I shot him at 85, so it hit him high, like 2 inches higher than where the crosshairs is. I was gonna make a point of that in that video, but so it just clipped the bottom of the shoulder blade, and then double lunged out the other side mid body, kind of just right at the edge of the diaphragm. It went out. I was a little worried about being under gun for mule deer, but that deer run 30 yards and was dead. So I don't know that that's the case. You start shooting 500 yards at them, you might be a little undergunned, maybe. I mean, I'm not a gun expert. Anyway, I think that's all I got for you guys. Like I said, if you have questions, leave them down below. Again, I'm not going to tell you where I was at exactly. I was in western North Dakota. We're in the mule deer zones out there. Yeah, that's all I got. If you guys got questions, drop them down below. I'd be happy to answer them for you. Otherwise, we'll see you guys in the next Schmattz Outdoors video.